Everybody. I'm Ani Anderson,
I'm
and
Brian Trzaskos. Oh, sorry, you're supposed to say
hello.
that.
No, that's your line. I wasn't going to take your line. We're joining you today from the Somatic Coaching Academy, and we're talking about work ethic and this pattern around work ethic. I'm actually really excited about this conversation. But before we dive in, uh, we just want to let you know that the Somatic Coaching Academy is really coming online. You might be watching us on LinkedIn, you might be watching us on YouTube or on Facebook Live right now. Wherever you are, please click the like or subscribe button so that you can get more trainings from us. And if you're on one and want to go to the other one, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, you can find us at the Somatic Coaching Academy and click that like button so you can get more training. All right, so Brian, we decided to talk about this topic on work ethic because we were at a conference and one of our colleagues was talking about how she and her partner, her husband and business partner, really gelled when they were younger because they had a great work ethic. That was one of the things that really bonded them at the beginning of their relationship. And so you had brought up this would be a really great concept for us to talk about together.
Yeah, and I think because in a lot of ways that is actually a binding factor for us as well, Ani. And so my question was, we were on a hike, and I said, Ani, where do you think? I know where my work ethic came from. For better, for worse, for uglier, for pretty, whatever it is. I know where mine came from, but I asked you, Ani, where do you think your work ethic came from? Because I think we have a shared value around that. And I'd like to break down work ethic a little bit more, but what was your response for me?
Well, I don't think I should answer it yet. And I know that you have notes. Brian came with an agenda.
I don't really have any notes. It's all up here.
Okay. Okay. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your ideas around work ethic, Brian? Because I'm really interested to hear a little bit about your story as well, so that people who are watching can understand a little bit more about. I'm going to date myself here for a second, but one of the TV shows that I loved when I was little was Fraggle Rock. It was a lot of people haven't heard of it. It's a TV show created by Jim Henson. It had these little Muppets in it, and one of the Muppets that I love are these little bug dozers. They were called. That was the name. They're these little bugs that are like always working in Fraggle Rock land, and you and your family are kind of like the bug dozers. So we want to hear a little bit about that. But before we do, why don't you tell us a little bit about your ideas around work ethic?
So I love that. So work ethic, what is that anyway? I mean, so it's like there's an ethic, an ethos, a way that we feel like we should be in the world or that we are in the world. It gives value to the world. Let's put it that way. And it's based around work. I think as far as work, when I think about work ethic, that's kind of what it breaks down to me. And what does it mean when someone has a good work ethic? Well, I think about a healthy work ethic. I think that there's healthy work ethics, and then there's things that aren't so healthy that we call good work ethics
That's
because
so
we want,
true.
right? Because we want to protect or defend the things that aren't necessarily healthy for us, our patterns, our beliefs, our constructs, those sorts of things. But I think a really healthy work ethic is the kind of energy where when we see something that we want to create or that we want to be a part of or that we want to build, and we feel like it brings value into the world or into other people's lives, that even on days where I'm not saying days we're sick or days that we're in bed with the flu or we have those kinds of things, but I'm saying even the days we don't want to get out of bed, even the days that we don't want to do something else, we still say, you know what? It's important for me to continue moving in the direction of building the thing that I think is going to bring value to the world. And it becomes a part of my life where it's just I get up and I add value to the world through work. Now, what does work mean? For me, work means taking something that is unmanifest and making it manifest. Right, taking something from the immaterial and making it material, really being in that law of perpetual transmutation of energy. That's kind of how I think about work. When I work, I'm taking something that doesn't exist and bringing it into something that does exist, and making that a very really important part of my life. Anyway, that's how I'm kind of thinking about work ethic.
I think it's funny because as I'm listening to you, I'm listening through my own lens of what work and ethic and a healthy work ethic, or that idea of work ethic, means to me. And there are some things that are similar, and there are some things that are a little bit different, I think, based on our patterning around what those things even mean. And I think that's so fascinating, right? Because we're all walking around as meaning making machines constantly. And one of the reasons we judge other people is because we see them, and they might be making meaning in a different way than we're making meaning, and we don't, it doesn't like agree, and it might rub us the wrong way,
Right.
and so we judge them or whatever. So I'm judging you right now is what I'm trying to say. I'm kidding.
Hey, I'm used to it.
I think it's oh, touche. I think that's part of my work. No, anyway, I think it's interesting just listening. Like, how cool is it to listen to somebody else's concept about what something means, to start to see that other people make meaning differently than we do? So that's really cool. I love how you were talking about work ethic and a good work ethic and a healthy work ethic, because I do think that's something that we don't necessarily want to confuse. Like, it's a gorgeous day here in the Adirondack Mountains. I'm looking out the window that's over on that side, and the trees are beautiful colors. The leaves are gorgeous, and the sun's out, and there's some clouds. It's just like a beautiful day. But I'm here doing this because it means so much to me. My ideas around work, not just productivity and getting a paycheck or something like that, but work, and you said bringing something into the world, I think is really interwoven with who I am as a person. And so here I am because we're bringing value into the world, and that's super important to us to do that, even though we could both be out hiking today, which also might be part of our work, depending on how we view the world. Anyway, super, super fun things to even think about, how we think, how each of us thinks. It's neat.
Yeah. So, and to build on that, Ani, I think about what's an unhealthy sense of work ethic. I think if we are, or when it comes to work, we've already talked about bringing something, from my perspective, right, bringing something into the world, and I'd love to hear more about your sense around that too. And then I think about unhealthy in the way of when we tie something else to the work. So when we tie our esteem to the work, or when we tie our need for appreciation of the work, right? Because there's three basic human needs. Some people say there's six. Some people say there's more than six. Some people say there's three. We kind of operate from the sense of there's three basic subconscious human needs, and they're the need for security, love, and self-esteem. And so when we tie one of those to work, and when we source our self-esteem, which isn't our right, we're sourcing it from somewhere else, or when we source appreciation, aka love, from somewhere else, based on the amount of work that we do, like that's where it becomes really detrimental. That's where it becomes problematic. And I've certainly traveled that path. And how do I know I've traveled that path? Because I find myself telling other people how hard I'm working.
Yeah, right.
Right. So if you find yourself saying, how are you doing? My God, I'm working so hard. I've worked 18 hours this week, and I've worked this long, and I've worked that long. Like, why are we telling people that? We're telling people that because they want us to appreciate, they want them to appreciate us for that. And this is how this is how I grew up. I grew up that there was a very high value, a personal value on work. And so that's kind of been a big, and it's been a big part of my life, and working with you, being together, as partners and as workmates also, to begin to tease out what's unhealthy about work ethic and what can be healthy about work ethic, and what can be healthy about work ethic.
Let's talk about the Polish pile, Brian. I'm serious. I think the Polish pile is like the perfect story to like go, oh, okay, this gives us a flavor of where Brian's coming from.
Right. Oh, okay. So the Polish pile was a pile of dirt that my grandfather had in his yard. And I'm sure he used it for something. It was like a big pile of topsoil. And he would use it on his garden and things like that. But when we were kids and we got dropped off at my grandparents' house on the weekends, or during the week on, when my parents were at work, and we got dropped off on holidays and that kind of stuff when my parents had to go to work, what we did was, it was our job to move the pile across my grandparents' yard. And then the next weekend we would move it back to that same spot. And we would sift it too, right? We'd have to put it up on this big sifter that my grandfather built. And we'd take shovels and we'd be sifting the dirt. And so we making the dirt finer and moving it back and forth across the yard by hand and with wheelbarrows. I mean, so we're out there like 10 years old, 10, 12 years old, shoveling dirt in the wheelbarrows and bringing it across the yard, piling it up. Next weekend, bringing it back again. That was how we were babysat for.
This was before the internet.
Yeah, this was long before the internet, right? We had 3 channels on the TV. We got a really good lunch, though. My
I'm sure you were hungry.
Yeah, my grandmother made a really great lunch for us, right? We had gwumkies and some, pickled beets and that kind of stuff. So these are my Polish grandparents, because it was the Polish pile.
Yeah. I love that. I think it just gives us a perfect sense of like where you came from. So when you asked me about work ethic, I really had to think about it because when I think about my patterning, I think about my mom and my dad. And my mom had jobs on and off as I was growing up. When I was in my subconscious formative years before the age of 7, she had some part-time gigs, but she wasn't like a full-time worker who went to an office or anything like that. And at some point, and it was after the age of 7, she had her own little shop in town and she was an entrepreneur. And then my dad had the same job for years and years and years. And it wasn't a passion thing. He'd go to the office and he'd work and he'd go home to support his family kind of thing. And so when I thought about work in terms of vocation and my parents, I thought, I don't think my work ethic came from that. And then I started to think about, well, like you started like, what is work and what is right? And so for me, I think in terms of work ethic, and I look back at my whole life, it's not just that I pour my work ethic into my vocation, I pour it into my life. So it's about working for my family, what housework needs to be done, what yard work needs to be done, and what vocational work needs to be done to support the family and all of that stuff. And so it was interesting to me to even think about that. I remember when my kids were young and I didn't have a full-time job at the time. I poured my heart and soul into my then husband's job and helping him to do things behind the scenes as much as possible so that he could be successful. So still I was there was that work ethic. And so I thought back to watching the people in my life that I grew up around, my parents, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents. And I remembered something, Brian, that I think was really interesting to this conversation in terms of where patterns come from. I can remember that the females in my world never stopped moving. They never stopped moving. So the guys would sit on the couch and they'd watch football or golf or drink beers. And they would also do stuff like they go to jobs. But like when we would hang out as a bigger family, the guys would be on the couch and the women never stopped moving. They would either be prepping something, making something, cleaning something up, always, always moving and bustling. And also a resentment too around stuff. It just in general was in the air. And so I think coupled with my work ethic was also this sense of resentment. And it shows up in different lights in different ways in different times. So sometimes it's like, this working harder than other people. And so it really started me to think about how, when with my work ethic, what of that is my female conditioning? My, as our friend Jay Pryor calls it, classical female trained conditioning, in terms of it's just the way it is for women. And so that was kind of a fascinating inquiry as you were asking me about it.
Yeah, so interesting. I would have to say the same. In one way, is that in my family, no one was ever sitting on the couch.
No one
Right. I
stops.
mean, we had a couch in the house that I don't think was ever used. No,
Yeah.
actually, I take that back. It was used on Christmas. We, we had a couch in the house I grew up in. I think it was only used on holidays.
Hmm.
That was the only time anyone sat on it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Otherwise, no one sat down.
Everybody's in constant.
Everybody was in constant motion. Yeah,
Yeah.
both my parents also were in constant motion all the time.
Yeah.
And my father is still in constant motion. You know?
He's out there right now.
Oh, is he?
Bugdozer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember for my family as my first memories were of me in dance class, of us as a family in community theater. I my first paid job was at 9, and I started working professionally at age 10. And so even school, which by the way, I also saw as work,
Mhm.
was just a part of this constant nonstop working. So both of us have been really patterned for work. And so I think it's funny, right? Because when we were talking about compatibility, we met each other, and one of the things that we appreciated about each other was our work ethic,
Yeah.
which is coming from these very strong, sometimes super functional and healthy, sometimes not patterns.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And again, until that was brought to my attention, I don't know why it didn't occur to me. I didn't know why it didn't occur to me that a value such as a work ethic is such an important bond in a relationship, right? In a personal relationship. And I guess what I'm saying is where the work ethic is. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it doesn't matter if I don't even know how to grade work ethic. Let's just say I don't know, but let's say on a scale of 0 to 10, whatever it is for you, where work ethic is, how important it is for a relationship, people to function in a relationship with one another, close relationships, that the work ethic has to be within a couple of points of one another, whether
Right.
it's like an 8 or a 9, or whether it's a 1 or a 2. Again, the number doesn't matter to me, but I can see a very separate work ethic from the people I've talked to. When they think about how much they're struggling, I think back, I'm like, wow, that was a big difference. That was a big complaint about the other person. Either they're always working, that's all they want to do is work, that's all they do all the time, or it was the opposite of that. So I have a fire alarm now going off in the building,
Yeah.
and so I need to go check that out.
Yeah. Mute yourself. It's terrible. So if you're, oh my gosh, that's horrible. Thanks. If you're watching, we want to hear whether you're watching live or whether you're watching the replay. What are your insights and takeaways? Hi, Brian. Um, what are your insights and takeaways? What have you discovered listening to this conversation about your work ethic, your your partner's work ethic? What is it that you like or don't like, or you find good or healthy or dysfunctional? So pop that in the comments below. And like I said at the beginning of the live stream here, if you haven't already liked the Somatic Coaching Academy Facebook page, YouTube, and LinkedIn, please do, because we're going to be coming to you with live stream trainings. Hopefully they won't have the fire alarm going off in them like this one. But we want to make sure that you get notifications for those. So you might be on any of those channels now. You can go to all of them and like us at Somatic Coaching Academy. Hope this was a helpful conversation to you. We look forward to having more, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.